I'm here to make the case that the emotion of shame gets a bad rap. Hear me out. A lot of people out there say, oh, shame is terrible, don't feel shame, don't feel shame. I'm here to say that shame serves a function when it's used properly. In terms of emotions, none of them are bad, none of them are wrong. They exist for a reason. I have another video on that. I'll link it below. Now, with the emotion of shame, we can think of shame as a community emotion. The reason why shame feels so intense and so life and death is because back in the day, if we didn't get along with our community would drop us off in the woods, our community would kick us out of the cave, they would feed us to the lions. And so the emotion of shame helps us to control the behaviors that are going to potentially get us kicked out of the group. The problem with shame today is it's still so hardwired to be this life or death situation that our brain really hasn't caught up with the fact that we can just go find a new tribe. It's not the end of the world. And so the emotion of shame, though, still serves a function. If we want to stay in certain groups, if we want to affiliate with certain people, the emotion of shame is something that can motivate us to do the behaviors that are going to keep us in the group. So guilt is more of a personal emotion. Guilt is where we violate our own wise mind values, and shame is where we violate the norms, the values, the mores of the group, and that the emotion motivates us to change those behaviors so that way we can actually stay in the group and not get kicked out. The problem comes about when shame does not fit the facts, like we're not going to get kicked out of the group. It is our own thought process that's potentially making us feel shame, and it's not the values of the group. There's also too where the emotion of shame causes us to hide something more than problem solve. So instead of using shame, because we can use our emotions to prompt us to do behavioral changes, the emotion of shame also propels us to hide problematic behavior so that way we don't get kicked out of the group. If we actually use the emotion of shame to get us to do behaviors that are going to keep us in the group, that is the proper use of the emotion of shame. The emotion of shame also propels us to, when we're caught, to hide, to shrink down, to bow our heads, to ask for forgiveness, to show remorse to the group. This also helps us stay inside the group. So shame can make it where we don't do behaviors that are going to get us kicked out of the group. We even think about doing it. We feel that emotion of shame and we're like, oh, can't do that. That's going to get us kicked out. The emotion of shame also, if we do get caught by the group, it allows us to be able to show remorse, to show appeasement, so that way we do not get kicked out of the group. Like I said, one of the big problems today is our brain still makes it our life or death, too overwhelming to deal with. And so we use it in this really negative way where we beat ourselves up instead of using it for positive. We can even think about, I recently have heard people saying like, oh, shame is toxic in recovery and things like that. I'm going to beg to differ on that. A toxic amount of shame, yes, when you're having to then use your substances to deal with the shame and not using the shame appropriately, then yes, shame, problem. If you are using shame to actually modify your behavior, and in fact, in DBT, we sometimes use that emotion of shame to keep us in line. And in AA, they will also use the emotion of shame. In fact, when they say play the tape through, look at how it's going to impact everybody else, doing your amends, that is all using the potential for shame to keep us from using our problematic behaviors. Shame, when used properly, can be a really effective emotion in order for us to change. Sometimes for some clients that I've worked with, guilt doesn't really work. The behavior that they're doing is in line with their value system. However, they also know that if they do certain behaviors, if they do certain things, they're not staying in the group. And it is an important group for them to stay in. It is a healthy group for them to stay in. And if they're doing these really maladaptive behaviors and their group isn't going to want them to stay, shame can be a great motivating emotion. Now, there's going to be a link in the description below for both the video on the emotions and what they do for us. And I'm also going to put a link in the description for a really interesting article about the evolutionary benefits of shame. This information is coming from that article from DBT as well as from RODBT. RODBT is a modality, an intervention for people that struggle with social signaling, struggle with perfectionism, struggle with too much shame, and that shame causes them issues. So the RO also goes over how to handle maladaptive shame. I hope I made my case for shame.